Welcome back to the Anchorage podcast. It has been several weeks since we've done a podcast, and we are now in the heat of summer. We are in week 3, just finishing up week 3 of summer camp, and have really 4 more weeks really to go of summer camp. And we want to bring you up to date on some things going on and catch you back up on our history. Now, David, from my history standpoint with the camp, started, of course, in 99. We talked about the first men's retreat in 99. But now we're over here at Swing Hinge today, and we're recording from over here. Tell me about, when did this property really become usable space? Because I remember that when I came as a sponsor, we were fortunate enough to have somebody in our church that had like a camper, and we could come and park our camper and stay in it. But most of the sponsors were still staying in the dorm rooms.
Yeah, that was a real hardship back in those days. The property over here, of course, was purchased and given to us back in the late 80s, and we took ownership of the property itself in the early 90s, although we had used to it even after they had purchased it. So we had an idea about what we wanted to do over here. As we talked about the last time, the camping had morphed over the years from 1979 when I started until 1998. I think we mentioned that our summer camping program just exploded, 72% increase or so from 1997 to 1998. Part of that was with the facility upgrades. There were some other reasons as well. But we were moving forward at a very rapid pace at that point in time. The school camping, 1999, along with the men's retreat. And by 2000, the fall program had just become unbearable to be able to carry out that program with just those of us that were on permanent staff, basically Jeannie and myself. My mom was in the kitchen, and then we had a girl that was doing part-time in the office, basically that scenario. And we had no maintenance staff, we had no custodial staff, we did it all, and it just become unbearable. Of course, we had to have more summer staff in the summertime, and I was getting older. I couldn't keep schedule anymore, and so there were just a lot more things that needed to be done, a lot more people that needed to be served well, and less people to do it with. So the first order on the agenda was we had to find A, the staff, and B, have a place to put them, because the numbers were such we couldn't fit everybody in the building anymore and not be able to maintain the numbers for camp. But we had no place for the summer staff to stay. Of course, the counselors stayed with the young people. And then the second big thing about it, and then of course the what we call the seasonal staff that were here through the fall months or into the spring months, winter months, as was necessary. And then the second thing is that I think I mentioned it before, is that back in the old days, people just drop the kids off the camp and then pick them up on Saturday, whether it was a church group or whether it was a family. But more and more so, the church, when they would send their young people to camp in the summer, they had their sponsors, and they had, usually the youth pastor and his wife or the Awana director and their family or whatever else. And we had no place to put them. They were having to stay in the cabins with the kids, or shared staff quarters with what room we assigned for staff. It was just an unworkable situation. It was not positive at all. And so we knew that we had to develop. We had this property over here. It wasn't developed. It wasn't being developed. We had made a couple of moves, I guess, to just preserve the property. Somebody gave us a bunch of vinyl siding. We scrounged up a little bit of money to put roofs on so that the rain just wouldn't knock the buildings down, and so we were able to put vinyl siding on and roofs. They were completely unusable. We done nothing to the interior. They were completely unusable. Still just a horrible eyesore, particularly on the inside. But they looked like something, and people could catch a vision of it. If you were able to do this, what would you do? And so I began to pray in earnest that we had to do something. And so we started. We made some moves that were met with reluctance. We'll just use that word, reluctance from the town. Back in 1974, before anybody knew what was going on, the town had not had any zoning regulations, and they adopted a whole zoning plan. And we didn't have any full-time personnel down here on the property at that time, so we kind of found out things after the fact as being part of the town of Lake Waccamaw. And what we realized is, after it was too late, was that the town had included our property and what became our property, the Good Shepherd property and the little camp that's down the road, Ambassador Camp, that they had included them into a fairly restrictive residential-only zoning plan. Wow. And so while you had some grandfathering ability, you couldn't expand the property, you couldn't incorporate new things, buildings and things like that were not associated with residents and fall into the residential zoning was forbidden. So developing this property into multi-family use, even on a temporary basis like a camp or a conference center, such like that, it just was not in the cards. Finding some places on the camp property, when we built that the garage after that one building had gotten blown down during one of the hurricanes in '96, the insurance company built the property and rebuilt the garage, and above it was, basically was ideal for an apartment. And it would be nice. We needed staff. We had especially single girls that were coming in and working in the fall staff, and needed a place for them to live, or a young couple that was coming in for a year or two. And so we had no place. We couldn't provide any staffing for any room for them, and yet renting temporary places without having places to rent around. It was just a mess. There was no path forward with those things. And then, of course, the summer staff that was necessary, having a place for them. So we decided to change over what we had developed over here, which was a little chapel area, change that over to a dormitory for summer staff, and it became impossible with the zoning situations. And we knew that any addressing that situation was going to be very costly. Of course, we didn't have any money. We certainly didn't have any money that we could raise and spend without any assurance that this was going to actually make a change.
Do it.
So that was a problem, and so we had it before the Lord. We were praying about it, and I had our board praying about it as well, and any others that were praying for us. That was a need, but it was kind of a pie in the sky, by and by sort of need. It was the way it looked at. And then the Lord works in mysterious ways. I've just come to realize the way that He actually answers prayers are not actually the way I would have done it. And so I've kind of gotten used to that over the years, I guess. But I just remember waking up one day going, it's time. We gotta move on this zoning thing. And so I wrote out, as what I would like to call my dream list. I thought about, if I was to be able to put a situation into a zoning request for the town, a zoning change, what would it be? And got to thinking about it. Didn't get a whole lot of outside advice on this. This is kind of the pipe dream scenario, and wrote it out. Here's what I'd have to be able to do to run a camp properly in these city limits. Here's what I think would be reasonable, when you're living in a neighborhood and such as that. But it also allow us to do what we needed to do as far as I could see forward. And I wrote that out, and it was pretty detailed and pretty broad, and nothing of it fit into the current zoning. So I was going to have a different designation for R20 residential, and so I wrote out even a title for it, that this would be a part of R20 zoning would be this definition. Wrote the definition in on it, and started praying specifically over that list. Well, if you
realizing you're kind of asking for a miracle.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, maybe a minor miracle, but a miracle nonetheless. But as the case may be, again, your reason, your rationale comes in going, no, David, that's way too much. It's not going to that's not going to happen. Nobody in the right mind and very few people in the wrong mind would go that direction. And so let's get more realistic. So I pared down my list to just the basics. I'm talking about bare bones. This is what we have to survive, not thrive, but survive. And so I did that, and it was basically shortened down to a paragraph, and said, okay, Lord, I got it now. This is where we need to go. Well, I did not know what had been happening in town. We don't pay taxes. We didn't go to town meetings and things like that. So I didn't know what had been going on in town. But evidently for several years, there were two outlying areas of town that were not part of the city limits, although they were getting city services. And so they were not part of the tax base, and the town had been trying to annex them for some time, and they didn't want to be annexed, as you can well imagine. People don't really volunteer to pay, when they're getting the services anyway, don't volunteer to pay the taxes and such. And so that had been going on back and forth, and trying to make some accommodations for that. Well, at the end of the day, what had happened is that there was I guess out of Raleigh in the legislature, that there had been a bill passed that allowed for a involuntary annexation of those areas of the town here in Lake Waccamaw. And that was carried through. And so, Lake Waccamaw, basically doubled in size. The area that I know as Bella Coola and Waccamaw Shores was brought into the town limits of Lake Waccamaw, and they were getting city services at the time anyway, and so I didn't think anything about it. It was just one of those things that happens, and it doesn't affect me. So what difference does it make to me? And so, not thinking about that, but praying about the zoning scenario, the town elections, this would be probably 2001, because they were off-year elections. The elections for the off-year were in November, and there were 3 out of 5 of the town council seats, mayor and two positions, that were up for grabs, as they are. And then there's 4-year terms, and so every 2 years the mayor was up for re-election, and 2 of the town council seats were up for re-election, and 2 were going to stay for their 4 years. So you didn't rotate the whole board at one point in time. And so the folks, the stalwarts that had been in there, were up for re-election, and there was every reason to assume they'd be re-elected. But the timing of the annexation was such that before the deadline of filing for those seats was up, that's when the annexation took place. And as fate had nothing to do with it. I can go back and see the hand of God in this so clearly, that once these folks found they were part of the town, they decided that since they're part of the town, they could run for the seats as well.
Right.
And they did, and they won. And I was fine, great. Happy. I had no dog in this fight. So this was what it was. Again, going back 1977, we had started with the rink. Primarily, we wanted to have some influence on the town, on the young people from the area, but almost because we just needed some money, some cash flow. We had started opening the skating rink, the old skating rink, on Saturday nights, and sometimes Friday and Saturday nights, to the public, and had a good influx. We were the only skating rink around. People came in, and parents began to trust us. And we had done that, and then when we rebuilt it, it became relatively popular for a while. There's always a fluctuation in the skating market. Some years are really good, some years are bad. But we had kept that open and available, and people had taken advantage of it for years and years and years and years and years. Well, I didn't realize, but I didn't even know who these folks were, was some of the ones that had been recently elected, the mayor, the 2 council people that had taken new positions there. They were bringing their kids to the rink every Saturday night. And as they were walking, of course, I was polite. I congratulated them. And they brought it to me and said, David, you're here part of the town. You've been a good influence. How can we help you? We're here. We want to be able to help every member of the town. I said, I need a zoning change. I just right out of the clear blue. Oh, what do you have in mind? Well, I don't know. I'd have to meet with you on that. So they set up a meeting and came down, brought the then town manager down. And as I was going to the meeting, we actually met on the front porch of the annex building. As I was going to the meeting, I went to my office to grab my survive list. And it was like the Lord stopped me in mid-track and said, take the dream list. And I had a little argument with the Lord there going, no, let's be realistic. And he take the dream list. So I grabbed the dream list. And we sat down and they asked, they were very polite and very open. And they're like, what do we need to do? I said, well, I need to develop this property over here. This was a hotel and on and on and on. And what we wanted to do is basically bring it back up, follow the footprint of the old hotel, and use it for camping, part of our camping program, especially the idea of adults and staff making it available. And so they looked at the list, they passed it up and down the line. There was four people there. And they looked at it and said, is there any reason that this can't be done? No, the town manager, the then town manager, I don't even recall his name now, was there good? No, this can be done. Here's how you got to do it. So we set up a time. I said, sure. Come up with a proposal. We got to go through the town planning board, and then they'll make a recommendation, and it'll go before the town council. And it's got to have a 4 out of 5, but the only time that the mayor could vote was if there was a tie. So it really had to have 5 out of 5, because anything less than unanimous with the council would not have passed. And I'm like, okay, we can do that. I was all excited about it. Okay, where's it going to go? Well, as the case may be, the time for this meeting came up, and the way that the town of Lake Waccamaw works is that on the first Monday of the month, at least that's the way it worked back then, the first Monday of the month is that you met with the planning board, and then the second Tuesday of the month, you met with the town council for if you, and the planning board would make a recommendation to the town council. It was not binding; it was just a recommendation, but the town council almost always followed their recommendation. And so you made a recommendation, and then on the second Tuesday, the council would vote it up or down, or you withdrew your petition or whatever you wanted to do. So, first happened to be this particular month that it was all scheduled for. The planning board, the first Monday, was Monday night or whatever. But the second Tuesday was 24 hours later. The month had started on a Tuesday.
Oh.
And so there was just back-to-back. Monday, Tuesday, 2 meetings, things should be done. Well, on Monday, the planning board had looked at this situation. Of course, I'd made the petition, written it all out and such. And the planning board had looked at it and determined that this was a bad idea for the town for whatever reason. Don't even want to assign motive, but had decided it was a bad idea for the town and unanimously voted. I think there were 7, if I remember correctly, on the planning board. Had unanimously voted that it should be negatively recommended. In other words, absolutely not to the town council. And 24 hours later, I was supposed to meet with the town council following a negative recommendation, 7-0, not even 5-2 or anything like that, but a negative recommendation that it be looked at. And I was like, wow, I was not prepared for that. And I went home and I prayed a good portion of the night. In fact, I walked in the next morning. I was going to go see the town manager early in the morning, and I had no idea what time the office opened. I got up there about 6:30 or whatever. The door was open. I have no idea if they just didn't lock up before the night before or whatever else. I walked in. I was sitting in his office when he walked in. So he was like, "Oh wow." He said, "That didn't go as well as I'd hoped last night." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right about that. What do I do?" And he said, "Well, the meeting's tonight." He said, "You can continue with it. and voted up. He said, but I will tell you, according to the rules, that if it's voted down, by the town council, that you cannot bring it back up for 5 years.
Wow.
And so I was like, wow, okay, then this is obvious what to do. I don't have time to politic. I tried to call a couple of guys, and everybody was out of town. They weren't going to get back in town until right before the meeting, so I didn't have any, and there was not a week to politic anybody. And I was like, okay, take it out. It didn't go well, but we'll attack it again from another direction. And so that was my plan, and I could not get past the idea that, Lord, you brought us this far, and what do I do? And so without any ado, I went to the meeting that night, and I was nervous, had my written statement out, talked to the mayor at the time, and I said, what's your feeling on this? He says, he said, I don't know what to say. He said, I know that I'm behind you, and I know one of the new guys, he said something like, I don't care if a hair lifts the Pope. These people ought to be able to do what they want to do with their property. And so it was like, but he said, everybody else, I don't know. He said, I haven't talked. I don't know how they're going to look at this, or if they want to table it, or what it's going to do. But just keep in mind that if you go through with this, you can still withdraw your request. That if you're going to go through with this, it'll be, if it's not accepted, it'll be 5 years. Okay, so I prayed very quickly. I felt like Nehemiah. I prayed, and then I went in. And as I went in, there was one item on business that night, us. And so they come up there and they're like, would you make a statement? And I got there. Well, what's the status on it? It has been, it had been negatively recommended, shot down, basically. There's nothing the planning board says that this would be good for the town, et cetera, et cetera. And as the case may be, he's still presenting it, so you get your chance to make your case. And so I got my prepared statement out, all official and stuff, and I'm reading it, and I get like a line and a half into the statement. I mean, maybe 20 seconds, and whoever it was on town council said, I think you ought to be able to do what they want to with their property. I make a motion that we accept it as presented. Anybody have a problem with that? And they're like, no. All right, call the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nobody. All right, it's passed. It's written in. Didn't cost us. I was thinking originally, I was like lawyer fees and legal moves and stuff like that. It didn't cost us a dime. And the Lord had opened the door, but he had opened the door literally because most everybody, again, even the people that were in the room that were interested, their kids were coming routinely, and it was a safe place and a place that they could trust. And they were getting the gospel and having a good time, beneficial for their family, that we had not foreseen. We were just basically trying to stay alive. And that opened the door for all kinds of expansion around here, and that's what we've been doing ever since. Got into the first of the rooms around here. As soon as we started developing the sponsor rooms, I realized this area got to go. People responded. We've now got 23, about to have 25, basically hotel rooms for families and couples and adults. Have got 2 dormitories over here, nice dormitories for summer staff and overflow, and what I call adult dormitories. Got apartment, staff apartment, real nice over here. Got a nice lounge. My house is over here now. It has just opened up the door. More adults have been coming in to the property are now. I mean, we got a family camp next week that we just established last year, and it's overflowing. I don't even have a place to put all the people that are coming. So the point is that that was seminal in changing the whole face of the ministry. One of the most important pieces of building advice I got was from a friend. He said, as you're developing property, build it for adults. You get adults on your property, things will fall in place for you. Now, it was a very practical thing, and he's a businessman. But as the case may be, I was thinking about that going, that has changed everything. We have 18% of our summer registration is the adult sponsors and families that come and be part of the camp. And it has tied our ministries and their churches and their ministries together in ways that we could only imagine years ago. And all because the Lord in His sovereignty opened up a door that was unique to us. I doubt there's very many places that have a zoning change story that where the town comes to them and says, how can we accommodate you? Oh, you need a zoning change to accommodate? Yes, we can do that. And so I'm reminded the heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord, and he directs it wherever He wants it to go. And I am so thankful for that. And it has certainly allowed me personally, I think those that have been influenced by the camp ministry, to be able just to look forward and trust, going, if that's what the Lord wants, that's what the Lord gets. And I'll just follow Him and do what He wants when He wants it.
Amen. I think that idea of build for adults, I think there's actually a biblical side of that too, which in the church, because it's very easy frequently for us to get young people. But if you're going to build the church, one of my former pastors said to me, he says, go after the man and get the family. Don't just get part of it. Go after the man. And if you can get a man, if you can get the head of the house, you can usually get the rest of the family, at least in time. Well, so thankful for how God has graciously showed His kindness to us over and over again. And just another example of how the Lord works in mysterious ways. I think, right, Liz, the song says, His wonders to make known. Thank you for joining us, and hope this has been encouragement to you. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Anchorage podcast. If you would like to learn more about the Anchorage Christian Camp, visit our website, anchoragecamp.org. If you have questions or podcast suggestions, please email info@anchoragecamp.org. May God be glorified. Hebrews 6:19, which hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, and which entereth into that within the veil.